If you just save $100 a month, it will take you 833 years to become a millionaire. $1,000 a month, it would be 83.3 years, and $10,000, you could do it in a little bit over 8 years. The point to saying that is, we always hear $10 a paycheck, $100 a month. Holy cow, that takes forever.
Like, our goal is not to hold this forever. Like, we're gonna go in, we're gonna force some value. We bought one for
Tanner, a few episodes back, you mentioned, and actually you've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, your Sherman Strategy, I think is what you called it. I wanted to kind of dive into that, unpack it, poke holes in it, whatever it is, and how can someone, if they want to start, like we'll use a couple of different scenarios. Maybe they brand new want to get into investing in 2026. Someone that's been investing for a little while, how would that pertain to them? And someone that's been, maybe they've been doing this for 20 years, but they're at a turning point in their life and want to change. So kind of, if you will, unpack your philosophy, your strategy, whatever it is, and how that pertains to those different areas.
yeah. So when I first got my real estate license and I was trying to find a framework, and I used to do a lot of phone calls just with new investors, mostly off bigger pockets, that I would get leads and they just knew they wanted to get started but didn't really know where to start. And so I tried to build this framework of how to introduce their their strategy. And I mean, I still hold to it today, that I think that that was the framework of what I work on even to this day. And it was built around 5 pillars of where your time goes. And the first being into your mindset. And we talked previously about, becoming the type of person. So if it was, before, every time you're in the car, you're listening to music, or, where does your free time go? You're playing video games, or, whatever, is that helping you get to where you want to go? And so changing the mindset around, instead I'm going to listen to podcasts, or I'm going to listen to audiobooks, or, I'm going to meet with people who are doing the thing that I want to do. And that's just changing your behaviors to be that type of person. And then the second was relational, is why are you doing it? That's a lot more into the why of, like, serving my family, serving my kids. Um, and and it's not to say that, well, once you've got the mindset, then you can just move on to the next thing. It's that you start off by improving it and being, I'm going to be more growth minded and more open to things, be realistic with where I'm at. And as I'm continually building the habits to work on those things, then I can move into bettering my relationships. Is what I'm doing here going to add to or take away from my relationships? And if it's, um, you know, I, the business that I want to get into is going to take all of my time away and I have to neglect my family, well, then it's not going to serve the end goal. And so being realistic with that. The third being financial. Um, and I used to always joke that if you put the financial before the relational, then you're not going to have a relationship, because they're going to take or they're not going to have finances, because that relationship's going to take half of everything. So focusing on what's important first, then realizing the financial. And in real estate investing, it's easy to go from, I want to start learning about all the different aspects in the mindset. And I'm going to learn about wholesaling, learn about flipping, learn about rentals, learn about multifamily, commercial. Then move into the, how can I add to my family and better my relationships through these efforts? Then it's the financial. Well, what are the financial steps that it takes for me to buy my first property? Maybe it's just budgeting, or maybe it's Dave Ramsey, get to zero. How can I get all of my debt so that, I can be more responsible, start doing the envelope methods, anything that works for that person. And then it goes into the growth. And the growth stage, I believe, is where you're taking more risks, doing the wholesaling and the flipping, and scaling quickly, trying to build up your net worth and have more resources to deploy. And for me, in that growth phase, it was, using my VA loan to go buy my first house, and then build up some equity in that house, and, buying my first property using other people's money to buy that property. And then the fifth is sustainability, is how can I preserve my wealth? And for me, and I have some properties where we're going to be getting out of partnerships and taking our cash that we make from that and deploying it into stable things that are going to provide us with cash flow. And so I don't think that anyone's in any one phase. And it's not to say that sustainability is only for, 65 and up, and growth is only for younger guys. Like I know people that are probably in their 70s or 80s that are still in that growth because they're still taking massive risk, but they have certain parts of their portfolio that they pull out of that massive growth, the high risk stuff, and they put it in more stable assets because they want to preserve it. And it's still kicking off money babies, but it's moving from something that maybe it has a risk profile of 15% upside. Like 15% return is my target for this investment. That's a growth stage investment. And if I try and go into a growth stage investment with a sustainability mindset, I'm going to be left disappointed or left holding the bag. So then moving into that sustainability is, well, I made really good money with this 50,000. I recovered my seed capital. I'm going to redeploy the profits from that into more high risk strategies. I'm going to take that 50,000 and put it into something safer. That it's never going to make me double my money, year over year, but it's going to continue going up in value.
So you kind of break out the latter three categories based on risk profile.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And what I don't think is that any one person is in any one of those areas at any given point. I think it's more of a tiered strategy of when you start working on the mindset, and then you can make it a daily habit of we talked about changing from listening to the radio to I'm going to listen to podcasts, and you know instead of going to the bars, I'm going to spend more time with my wife and kids. Whatever that looks like for the individual, it's just making those more of a habit.
Okay. So do you have any clear cut guidance, or is it just kind of opinionated, I guess, or um, personality driven as far as each category? How's that work?
Yeah, it's always been more personality driven. Like it's more of just these are the frameworks of the conversation that I'm going to have. And I start off those calls, they're usually half-hour calls, and I used to have my calendar stacked. I would do maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 of them a day, and just every single day be talking to more people. And I would start off with the same pitch essentially of I'm going to fire things at you, and it's going to feel like drinking out of a fire hose, but the more we start working together, the more it's going to start making sense. And so I can give custom tailored strategies to each individual. Like and it's more me trying to uncover what it is they're looking for. And, I had a single guy that was looking for a rundown property that he could house hack and force a lot of equity into. And so we found him that property, and it was a triplex. He forced a lot of equity into it, and he's doing really well. He's cash flow positive. He just reached out to me last week and said, "Hey, I'm looking for another property now." And so his is that growth phase of it's high risk to do a construction project, especially with no experience. But he knew that that's what he was looking for. But it had to be nice enough to where he could get into it with an FHA or a conventional loan. So it had to qualify for financing. It can't be a rundown, shack. So it's finding that threshold, knowing that his goal is he has a retirement number. And so when we start with the end in mind, his sustainability number is I would love to have $10,000 a month of just cash flow coming in from my investments. So we know, okay, you need this much in paid off real estate, the same way that a financial advisor would look at it. If your goal is to retire with X dollars amount, you need this much invested. So we got to invest $1,000 a month. I think the same way, but with real estate, I think you can get to that end number a lot faster if you're willing to be risky in the growth phase. And so he's forcing a lot of equity into it. It's going to get him to that sustainability number where he can take his portfolio of maybe he's moved 5 times in the last 10 years. And every time he forces a ton of equity into it, sells all those off. Now he has $3 million in paid off real estate. That's just going to kick him off 6% per year. And so that's where he'll move to the sustainability. But does that mean that he's going to retire and he'll only ever do safe investments? Absolutely not, because we're all glutton for punishment. So as real estate investors, you got to be a little crazy. He will, I'm sure, park that money in that safe 6% harbor and then move back into doing other flips and other things to keep his time busy.
Yeah. So I actually just seen this morning. I'd never done the math, and obviously this doesn't take any interest or compounding effect or anything like that into consideration. But if you just save $100 a month, it will take you 833 years to become a millionaire.
Hmm.
$1,000 a month, it would be 83.3 years, and $10,000 you could do it in a little bit over 8 years. My point to saying that is we always hear, oh, just say, $10 a paycheck, $100 a month, $50, whatever it is. Holy cow, that takes forever. So I mean, you have to have some kind of, obviously, their stock market is people. I don't know. I was reading something the other day, and someone said about live off from 70%, invest the rest, the 30%, and in that buy two single family homes a year with that 30%. I'm like doing the math in my head. So they're saying put in a 401k, IRA, whatever. So say that's 10% that you're putting in there. That gives you 20% left over to buy two single family houses. Like, how many hundreds of thousands do you need to make in order to buy say you make $200,000, so that's 40,000 to buy two single families? Did I just do the math? No.
I mean,
Yeah,
buying a single family for $200,000 and it's a $40,000 down payment every time.
well, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's one single family.
Mhm.
So they're saying to do two. And how many $200,000 single family homes are you finding across the nation, especially today? So it's just sometimes these long tangent to say, sometimes these one size fits all social media
Did
posts
did
aren't
you
necessarily good.
have you ever read Brandon Turner's 7 Years to Seven Figure Wealth?
I don't know. Is that the one? I mean, is that where he kind of started with the habits or the property stacking, or?
Yeah, essentially. So he wrote this many years ago. It's a like an ebook, like a flip book kind of thing. But it was super. It was I thought it was super helpful because he says, you buy a single family or duplex in year one, and then year two, you're figuring out how to manage it. You're building up, taking the cash flow from that, your active job. You're taking some more cash, putting it aside. And then year three, you go and buy another property. Year four, you buy another property. Year five, you buy three properties, six, seven, so on. And through that stacking, after 7 years, you should have $1 million in real estate. So I've basically built the same philosophy. Now I don't think that it's
When you
this.
say $1 million in real estate, you're not saying $1 million. You're saying $1 million equity
Mhm.
in your real estate portfolio, or are you saying $1 million?
I'm if I remember correctly, his flip book thing was about $1 million in equity. After 7 years, you should be able to build 1 million in equity by buying this strategy, taking all the cash flow, using it to buy the next property, and so on, and some of your active income. And in 7 years, you'll have $1 million in equity. And if that $1 million in equity is earning you, call it 6 to 10% interest, you should be able to make a, another decent chunk to be able to compound that faster. But what I've found is that that's too slow for most investors, which is why I think the growth strategy makes more sense. Is they need to go and double their equity every year in order to get to where they want to go in less than 10 years.
Is that possible? In
I,
today's market, do you think it's possible to, unless you're active in real estate as a passive investor, is it possible to double your equity in 7 years, 10 years?
Passive? No, I don't think so. But I don't think that. And when I think of passive strategies, it's investing in other people's projects or whatever. But
Well, maybe maybe you're making $250,000 a year as a, you know, IT consultant or whatever you're doing, and you're living off from that, let's call it 70%. And so you have, whatever that comes out to, $75,000 a year to invest. I only want to buy properties that are in myself. I'm gonna start an LLC. I'm gonna do this Brandon Turner strategy that you just talked about. I forgot the name of it, but and so I'm gonna invest $75,000 a year buying one single family, and that'd give you what, $300,000 home you can buy every year by putting 25% down.
Mhm.
Can you double your portfolio in 10 years?
I absolutely think so, and especially when you start packaging them together. And like the investor that I'm talking about, he's forcing the equity in there. So he might buy it, like he bought that for, I don't know, it's 185,000. And it's probably worth 220 now, maybe 250. And if he goes and buys another one, does the exact same thing, buys 185, 200,000 for, I mean, it was a rundown triplex, and then makes it worth $75,000 more plus the equity he has tied into it. Now he's got $250,000 in equity in 3 years. Like, I mean, you do the math, you do that three more times, there's $1 million right there.
How active is he in there doing the work? Is it, I mean, basically a side hustle, I'm assuming?
Yeah, he still has an active job. And so, but for him, it was renovating a unit. He lives in that unit. Once he's done renovating it, then, he'll move into the next unit, put a tenant in that first one. And so, what he's done has been very smart. It's taken him a year and a half to do. Well, yeah, not quite a year and a half. So, he's done it a very smart way. He's a single guy. And so, he has that luxury to do that, but he knows exactly what he wants to build um, before he has a family and has kids and wants, and I joked with my wife about it when we first learned about real estate and we were looking at houses. I was like, oh, we can use our VA loan to, get a fourplex. So I'm not living in a fourplex and I'm not sharing our yard with neighbors and all that stuff. It would be so much faster to do it that way. Like, we would have grown our wealth so much faster doing it, but it didn't fit our lifestyle at the time. We already had six kids with a seventh on the way. So
Yeah, so I always think about this. I don't know how legal this is. I haven't looked into it to find out, but my situation, like we would love to go overseas and travel. What if I bought a fourplex as my primary residence? I did short-term rental or something, Airbnb on one that I lived in and just traveled overseas for a year. Is that legal?
from my understanding, it wouldn't be. And so I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, for VA, FHA, and a conventional primary home buyer loan, not saying conventional as an investment, because with a conventional primary home buyer, you can go as low as like 3%. Usually it's around 5%, but with an investment conventional loan, you got to put 25% down usually. Um, but your intention at the time of purchase has to be that it will be your primary residence and you'll live at it a minimum of 6 months out of the year. And so, and it might even be more than that. But um, that being said, the way that I've seen people do it in the past is they buy the property, life changes, jobs change, whatever, that the lender is not coming in to check and knock on your window and make sure that you're sleeping in there at night. So people do
I
it.
agree. I mean, I guess I'm not, obviously I'm trying to skirt the rules, but I'm not trying to do it legal because you can get into mortgage fraud
Mhm.
by doing it illegally. And so that's what I said. I haven't done any of the checking to see if that's legal because I mean technically you're living there. You're just subletting it.
Well, put it this way, the FHA loan, it's for primary home buyers, and it has to be your first time purchase. If you move into a house and find out the neighborhood's not safe for your family, or your work changes, or anything like that, then you can go and buy another house in that same year, in that first year, and you didn't commit mortgage fraud. But if, I mean, now they're watching this and they know that you're premeditating this, so you might not have that same luck. But if you, before you buy the property, say, I have no intention of living in it and I'm just going to use this for the low down payment, that's mortgage fraud. And
Yeah,
so,
and maybe it's not illegal what I'm saying, but as we're talking about it, I think it definitely goes against the intent uh, of the law or the rules or whatever. Like it's made to be the VA loan and the FHA loan is made to get somebody that maybe can't afford another home or doesn't have the down payment get them into a home, and that's kind of the reasoning for it.
basically, the way that it was presented to me, and obviously I'm not an attorney, but if the same with tax law, if you can look your auditor, your IRS auditor, in the face and tell them this was a legitimate business expense, like I needed to buy this Xbox for my business, and you can say it with a straight face, then go for it. But they can, I mean, it's up to discretion. And so if you're looking at an investigator and saying, I used my VA loan to buy this house, and then, my wife's dad got sick and we decided to go travel and go see, him or whatever, that's why we're not living in the house. But that was never the intention before you bought the house, then okay. But if you're already going into it thinking I'm just going to get this low down payment and then go travel, like it's going to be hard to look an investigator in the face and tell them honestly, I had no intention of doing this.
So let's circle back to what we were initially. You were talking about your buddy or guy you know. So let's go back. Start of the conversation. How's the conversation go? What are some of the questions you ask? How do you get him in that triplex? How do you know that this is what he's looking for? How do you get him in there? How do you next phase of growth or next property? How just kind of unpack that whole.
Yeah, so I mean, it comes from a lot of initial calls of just from that first conversation. I hear where they're at, like what they say. I think I want to get into real estate and like start
Can
uncovering.
you give a couple of examples of what you would ask? Obviously, you probably haven't done this in a little while, but if I was a new client calling you, how would you walk that dog, if you will?
Yeah, so I'd ask, um, how much education have you done on it, and that's part of the mindset pillar of what about real estate interests you, what sectors, what strategies, and I mean, I can start to tell pretty quickly if they're educated or if they just saw a 30-second clip on YouTube and decided, I could try this. And so if it seems like they're one of the latter type where they just saw a clip, thought, it's a quick way to riches, I would start providing resources of like, look into this, tell me about this strategy, what do you think of this? And maybe that's the house hacking idea of they have like finding out their resources, how much money do they make. I'm very open about those conversations to get an idea of where they are, and then I can recommend strategies. And if they say, like, I've had client call me before and said, I've been working at my job for 18 years. I have 500,000 in my 401k, and I have 50,000 saved up, and I think I want a fourplex. And I go, okay. And so, or usually they'll say, I want a 5 to 8 unit, and I want to live in it. So then I can start to correct some of those things that are misconceptions and say, well, if you want to do the house hacking strategy, the best way to do it is to go into a 2 to 4 unit, because then you can use those primary home buyer loans. Now, you can buy an eightplex and you go live in it, but you still have to get commercial financing and treat yourself like a tenant because you're buying it as a business more than a primary residence. And so just educating them on those strategies and start to narrow them down. And then I start really vague and I start showing them properties of, I could do 5 minute underwriting and just look at a property selling for 400,000. This is the rents that it's bringing in. This is what you'll have to pay out of pocket, and then send it to them. And they just think, I don't really like that area. Like, okay, then we need to be more realistic on the price. And you need to probably spend the next 6 months setting aside another $20,000, whether it's picking up a side hustle, DoorDash, do something to make an additional income stream. Or we go into that financial pillar of, is there anywhere we can cut some fat out of to put that aside for your end goal of investing? And being realistic with you're not going to get into this with zero money. You got to put something in. And then so usually I can uncover what their goals are and then help them build a strategy with the end in mind of, let's start by buying that fourplex and then give it a couple of years of cash flow. In year 3, we'll reconvene, say, do you want to do another one of these fourplexes, or are you ready to do a more aggressive strategy? Because then maybe you can go leverage against that fourplex, take out a HELOC, and then you can hard money lend to yourself to go fund your next projects. And you can combine that with other strategies to do that growth, that high aggressive. I had one investor call me from out of state, um, and he said, I'm a teacher in on the West Coast, and I'm divorced. I have no kids at home. My house went up in value a ton. I have $120,000 line of credit, and I really want to retire myself in the next 6 years. And so I did the math, and I showed him, for you to make the same salary that you're making right now, you are going to have to do very high leverage activities that are high risk. But if it pays off, which there's no guarantee it'll pay off, but if it pays off, it can get you there in 6 years. So he used his HELOC as a down payment on that first property. Or no, he used that entire HELOC to pay cash for a property, and then took all of the rents, and I think it was like 50% of his active income to pay that HELOC down aggressively. Then he had some available on the HELOC. He borrowed some money from a family member, bought 4 more units in, I think he was year 2 or 3. So now he's got 5 units, and he takes all the cash flow from all those to pay down the HELOC. And then he's looking at he had to invest, I don't know, $30,000 into the duplexes to increase the value of those. But now he has a substantial amount of equity built up. And so he started with $0, zero of his own dollars. He used a line of credit, family money, borrow from the bank. And now he has equity of 300 to 500,000. And so he's looking to take those 5 units, 1031 it into a bigger building. So somewhere between 8 and 12 units, and the cash flow will be a little bit less, but the appreciation will be more. He'll still be doing the same debt pay down strategy and taking his active income, which has increased over the last few years. So he has more to contribute to be able to build up his equity faster. And so while he's not cash flowing a ton, it's not, anything to run home to, he's created almost $500,000 in equity just by being extremely aggressive. Part of that's market timing, part of it's, buying the right assets, but he has a higher risk profile. He referred his parents and his brother to us, that both his parents and his brother had paid off real estate on the West Coast. They realized it's only going up, 2 or 3% per year. And some years it's, not doing great. So they sold off some of those paid off properties, bought apartment buildings in Omaha that, are maybe just covering their expenses, but they're getting a lot more of that appreciation. But my strategy for them was completely different. And I told them that you guys don't need, like, whereas, your brother is getting, 100% leverage on all these properties because he's using his HELOC and using bank financing. I think you guys really need to look to put 40% down on any of these properties because you're not looking for that high growth. You're looking to park money and still get some of the benefit. So, anyways, that's long-winded story of, like, all these 3 family members all have completely different strategies based on where they're at the time. And so the brother and the parents, they're in the sustainability for their funds, whereas he's still in that growth. And they've been investing for pretty similar amount of time. They just bought differently.
So, would you say based on your down payment is kind of, I'll back up to a few weeks when we had this initial conversation. I said something about I want to take 50% of my profits from business. So say I make $100,000. I want to take $50,000 and buy a single family home. And you said I was more in the sustainment phase doing it that way. I guess I'd look at it as still growth because I'm growing my portfolio. I'm growing stuff. I'm protecting against downside risk as far as inflation and all that. Because typically real estate's an inflation hedge. But you would characterize that as sustainment versus growth, correct?
I think it depends on what it is that you're buying. Like if you're going to buy a $100,000 property and put 50,000 down, I mean, then yeah, I guess it does come to the down payment, the percentage. That property, if it goes up 6% per year, you get a 12% return on your investment, but you're only really creating 6,000 in equity. But if you take that 50,000 and you buy what would that be?
200,
Yeah,
250.
$250,000 property, putting the minimum amount of down payment possible, you're not going to cash flow, but you're looking to get more of that upside. So because your return on the actual dollars that you invested would be much higher if that property goes up 3 to 6%.
Okay, so you kind of base it off from the risk profile of each deal, if you will,
Yeah, absolutely.
and kind of going by the
Well, I mean, put it this way: if I have $1 million in cash and I buy a property worth $1 million and it goes up 3%, I just made 3% on my $1 million. But if I take that $1 million and I spread it out amongst 5, $200,000 property or whatever that math is, then every time that one of those properties goes up 3%, my net worth has gone up significantly more than if I just had a property paid off cash. But if what I'm looking for is more of that cash flow and that safety of I want it to continue going up in value, but I also want it to be able to cover its expenses, then I say that's more in sustainability because I'm parking money. So and I think if you tie it less to the down payment and more to the velocity of the money, it's probably easier to understand. It's because my velocity is much higher using that money as a minimum down payment on multiple properties than it is on $1 million property.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it comes back to velocity and how much risk you have, how much debt you have, I guess, because that's what you're doing is you're leveraging the amount of debt. Or that's the beautiful thing of real estate, at least in America, is you can leverage all that debt to in order to buy more. If I had to use your $1 million and I want to buy stock, I can only buy, I can diversify and buy multiple things, but I can only buy $1 million worth of stock. Versus if I have $1 million, I can go buy $4 or $5 million worth of real estate.
Hmm.
To your point, if it goes up 6%, it's really like going up 24% or 20 or 30% versus the stock market. If it goes up 6%, it just went up 6%. So that's kind of the
Yeah, and I mean leverage is one of the big powerful parts of it. I mean, the depreciation, the equity, the debt pay down, all of those things combine the benefits of real estate. And so that's where talking to a couple like I talked to a couple who they said, yeah, we really want to buy apartment buildings. And like someone asked, okay, what's your reasoning for wanting to buy apartment buildings? Well, we want to be able to offset some of our income. That's a misconception because buying an apartment building is not going to offset your active income. That's the active bucket and the passive bucket. Because so I said, well, what if you took that exact same amount of money and you bought a Airbnb property in Florida, in Tahoe, somewhere, and your so there's the short-term tax loophole where you can take the depreciation from that property to offset your active bucket because you will make more money with the tax savings off your active income than you would by buying that apartment building that's probably going to appreciate more, but that's not your goal right now. And so that's where combining the strategies to figure out where exactly they're at, I can provide better recommendations.
yeah. I mean, that is the beautiful thing about real estate is if you have $1 million, go back to your million dollar scenario, and I buy a property, and I say I spend $1 million, but I only buy a $2 million property. But I could have potentially saved $250,000 in tax savings right there in year one. That might be the only thing I care about. And then next year I can do the same thing and still save $250,000. And that's another way that I look at it as far as growth, because time value of money tells me if I'm saving $250,000 in year one, like that's way better than anything. And now, yes, I might only be getting 6% or 12% uh, growth or whatever it is on that money, but I still saved $250,000 in taxes year one. So with the new cost, I say new, the
Bonus
reinstituted bonus
depreciation.
depreciation
Hmm.
cost seg thing, I think that's a game changer for real estate and looking at real estate for the long run and um, making it part of your play.
And part of that risk adjustment is like I've had people come to me and say, I really like my job. I've only been doing it for 5 years, but I plan on doing a full 20. And I have this money. I don't need cash flow. I just want to park it in some real estate that's paid off when I'm ready to retire. So my recommendation for them would be, okay, go buy every single year, buy that single family house for the next 15 years and put them all on 15-year notes. They will break even. We can adjust the down payment percentage based on where the interest rates are at the time. So that maybe this house, you got to put 35% down. The next year, interest rates went up. You got to do 45% down. But if every year you're putting that money aside and you're buying another property on 15-year notes, and then you take any cash flow that you have from one to pay off the next one, in 15 years, you'll have, 15 paid off properties. Now, I know there's more logistics that go into it, but ultimately that family could have, I don't know, what, the $3 million in equity and paid off real estate. You can do a lot of damage with that.
Not to mention the cash flow at the end of that,
Right.
if they wanted to, or they could just pull loans out
Yeah.
and
Refinance. I mean,
refinance it.
1031, there's so many options, but it's just customizing the strategy to them. And it's not to say that that strategy is a sustainment strategy and this strategy is a growth, but it's more around the mindset of being realistic with what kind of risk profile you're operating in. Someone says, that they really need the cash flow. They want out of their W-2 job right now, and they don't want to lose money. They're very, scared of losing money. Well, then the growth strategies that I have are not going to work for you because you're going to lose money sometimes. Now, we keep doing it so that the winners beat out the losers, but they would be one who, even though they're in their early stages, I would say then you need to buy properties that you can have a substantial equity position going in, which means you need to save up more money before you even start. And that would be a sustainment strategy because they're more worried about wealth preservation than they are about wealth creation. And if they say, well, I want, low risk and I want to double my equity every year, that's not, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I hear so much about real estate's so expensive, you can't afford it anymore. Nobody in their 20s can buy a single family home and live in it. Insert reason and excuse for days of why we can't do it anymore. And while I agree that things have gotten more expensive, there are things like VA loan, the FHA loan, that'll get you in for 3.5%. Like I got an 18-year-old, she'll be 19 here in 4 months or whatever. And I keep trying to tell her, while you're in college, buy a single family home. Get a 4 bedroom, rent it out, the other 3 rooms to your friends. Let that compound for the other 2, 3 years you have in college. You can move out at that point in time. You've lived in it long enough that you can just move out and rent it out to somebody else, or you can just sell it, take that equity, and buy another home when you move back to Omaha. And that will give you such a leg up versus you're paying the same amount. You're actually losing money by not doing that.
Hmm.
Not, and when I say losing money, I mean monthly, because if you're paying $500 for rent, she can, if she gets a 4 bedroom, more than likely be paying less money. Maybe she's paying 250 versus $500. So she's spending $250 more a month for however long she's got in college, 3, 4, 5 years, plus losing out on that equity and the loan pay down from her
Yeah, and
roommates.
while I agree that that is the best, the smartest strategy to do, I would say that the risk there is, what if she can't find anyone to move in with her? Can she sustain that mortgage, in the entire mortgage, compared to where she's at now? And then the other side of that is, when things go wrong, if you're renting, things go wrong, it's not your problem. You still pay $500 every month. But if things go wrong when you own the house, you got to come up with 5 grand to go replace a furnace. And
Well, for the first one, I would say it's hard to dish because they're already trying to find a 4 bedroom place, with roommates and stuff like that. There's no difference there whether they're paying another landlord or she's the landlord. The part and I agree with is if the AC goes out, now she's got a $5,000 bill, uh, hail damage or whatever, and you got a
Mhm.
deductible or whatever it is. That is part of the risk, but I would argue in 3 years she would at least break even and plus recoup her $250 a month. Obviously you can run 20 different tests on that and see what
yeah,
happens or doesn't.
and I think what I'm saying is, if she's got 4 friends that are already ready to go into it, then great. But we underwrite it as, what's the worst case scenario, the stress test of, if all 4 of these stay the entire 4 years of college, then yeah, life's great and it works out perfect. But what we know about real estate is it never works out perfect. So look at what's the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, 3 of my roommates move out. It takes me 6 months to be able to find another replacement that I'm comfortable living with. And can you sustain that for that amount of time?
I would argue, going back to what you said earlier, my goal was to live in here with 3 roommates. Something happened and all my roommates were in a car that drove off the side of a cliff in Lincoln. There's no cliffs in Lincoln, but you get the idea. I had to rent it out to somebody else because it was the only way I could make it work.
Yeah, there you go.
So
Then you have another exit strategy. And I say that about any investment opportunity, is, if you're buying this and it only makes sense if everything works out perfectly, that's something that I would probably recommend against. But if you have 3 or 4 different exit strategies where it's like, if it works out perfect, I make, a 20% year over year return. And if it doesn't work out as good, I can at least break even. But what's the worst case scenario? Because a 18-year-old kid that's been living there for 3 years, if they can't afford the mortgage and they wind up getting foreclosed on, that's going to do a lot of damage to them. So I just
Oh,
think taking all those risks into consideration.
no, 100%. I mean, it's investing. It's not, you know, guarantees.
Hmm.
So it's like anything. You put in stock. I put money in, what year was it? 2006, 2007, something like that. And Chevy, um, like, the car dealer,
Hmm.
and all that went bye bye in 2008. So it's investing. Like, I would have thought that Chevy was a
Safer.
safer bet than real estate investing, but all that money went down to zero. So, and they got yeah, that's a whole different, still burns my butt with all that, but
Yeah.
there's nothing that's not guaranteed. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and so I think the strategy has to be tailored, but I mean, it changes over time. It's not fixed. It's not like I have certain uh, dollars, seed capital, that I might be using on a growth strategy, and certain dollars that I want to put into a sustainment strategy. And it's if you look at traditional retirement accounts, like they have them in how much do you want in growth stocks and how much do you want in treasury bonds. Like it's a 60-40 profile. You should do the exact same thing with real estate investing. And we had Dean on before. He talked about dollar cost averaging. If let's say that I have $1 million that I'm investing, and I have a very high risk tolerance, so I have 80% of it in a high risk strategy, which is hard money lending and flipping and all those really risky strategies. And 20% of it I have it parked in real estate that I just want the appreciation and the tax benefits. I'm not going to get much cash flow off it. If that 80% goes up, and winds up being 90% of my portfolio, then I could take 10% off of that, 10% that I have redeploying every year into high risk areas and buy another property. And then I have my 20%, I have my balance back. And then as my lifestyle changes, I get closer to retirement, whatever that number is, whatever day it is, and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm kind of more at a balanced strategy. I want 50 and 50. I can take from that high risk repetitive flipping business and put that into parking into real estate. Now, I get your argument that in putting that money in investment properties is still a growth strategy, but I would say it's more of the wealth preservation than something that's like my goal is short-term capital gains.
you would put it akin to bonds or something like that, as far as, so yes, it's growing, but it's
Mhm.
not, my 4% on bonds isn't going to make me rich. It'll just sustain me through
Exactly.
the bad seasons.
Exactly. And that's the same thing as if I'm buying rental properties to hold. Yes, I get that they're still growing. The goal is not for you to lose money on them. But what I think would be a more accurate example is short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains. Is the growth stage is I'm trying to get short-term capital gains. I'm trying to expand my money quickly. And when I reach those certain thresholds, I'm going to park it in things that are long-term capital gains.
I got you. So, yeah, I just, my way of investing is I don't, my short-term capital gains is business,
Mhm.
not real estate,
Yep.
versus someone that maybe they're flipping, maybe they're younger, like you're talking about your buddy with the triplex, and moving from unit to unit and renovating them as he lives in them, and then renting them out afterwards. I would more that's more akin to flipping than,
Mhm. Active versus passive.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I've done both. I've flipped a couple houses. I ended up keeping them all, but just because the market was changing at that time. But I mean, that sixplex that I bought with you, like those two bottom units, we pretty much, had to rip all the sheetrock off the walls and all that because of damage and whatnot. And so more or less a brand new unit by the time it was done. But I don't know how much of that I would do again.
Well, and that's I've had apartment buildings that we go into with a short-term strategy. Like our goal is not to hold this forever. Like we're gonna go in, we're gonna force some value. I mean, we bought one for I don't know, 400,000. We go put money into the units, extremely high holding costs, and then we go and sell it. And then I've had I have a duplex that we just parked money. We had to fully renovate the unit, so it did have an active component. But our goal or our intention going into it was not to refinance and pull our money out or to sell it and turn a profit. It was to hold it. So we put the money into it so that we get a better tenant, hold it long term. That seed capital is following more of a sustainment strategy than a growth strategy. If my goal, let's say I take 50,000, I go buy a property, I renovate it, I refinance it really quickly, then I would say that the initial project was the growth strategy. The secondary project was the sustainability, because now I'm going to hold on to that and let it do its thing and take that seed capital and go redeploy it in another one. The BRRRR strategy, I think it's a combination of both. It is starting off with growth with the intention of refinancing, taking your seed and redeploying it. But what happens to that first property? It's no longer in the growth strategy. It's now in the sustainment.
How would you characterize this? So I obviously very bullish on real estate, part of my long-term wealth strategy. How would you classify this in your system? Say I buy a 12-unit apartment building and it's in dire need of renovation. And maybe we non-renew people when the lease is up and turn the units, renovate them. Maybe it's 1950s units that haven't been touched in 70 years. Bring them up to 2025 standards. Re-rent them out at higher rents. I'm not doing any of that work. I have a property manager. They manage whatever I said, all 12 units. Is that sustainment? Is it growth? Is it both? Because I'm not actively doing anything. I'm paying our property manager to do it. How would you classify that? Is it a hybrid? Where would you go with that?
I'd say sustainment. I mean, because what you didn't mention is your exit. Is everything you said is I'm going in, I'm doing these things, I'm hiring people to do it all, and then you're going to hold it. And so if you're holding it, then any money that you use to buy the property and any money you use to put into it, you're leaving in the property because you're trying to improve it to make your return on investment for that capital last longer.
Yeah, but I could always refi out. So maybe it's a long-term burr, if you will. Maybe it's a 3-year burr, but I can still get my money out at any point. Maybe it takes 3 years or 2 years to turn all those units. I can still refi after that and say I bought it for 600K and now it's worth 1.2 million. I can take all my money out plus whatever I have invested in it and basically have a $1.2 million asset with nothing in it. No money in it.
Right. So then on the front end, you had a growth intention. You went into it to add value to the property, increase the rents, get that stabilized rent to then go to the bank, refinance, pull out your seed capital. So that's the end of your growth phase there. And then whatever you do with that capital, that initial 600,000, that's its own strategy now. But that property that now you said 1.2 million, you pulled out your 600,000, you have a 50% equity position in it, right? All of which you
Well,
created.
in my head, I bought it for 600. I put 300 into it. It's worth 1.2.
Okay, so you have if you pulled out all your initial investment, so you pull that 900,000, you have a 300,000 of equity that you created. So you maximized your leverage there, but you're going to let that ride. And then you're going to take that 900,000 and go redeploy it somewhere else. So I think that it's more the intentionality behind the strategy. And if you take that 600,000 plus the 300,000 and the goal is to get it back out and redeploy it, that's a growth strategy. Because if it was a sustainment strategy, you would put 600 into it, put another 300 into fixing it up, and then you would just leave it there and let it cash flow. Now that's not the
That's,
best way to velocize your money.
are you saying that's, in what case is that I bought it for 600, I put 300 into it over 2 years, and I leave it in there? That's a
sustainment strategy, because you're lowering the velocity of your money in order for the safety of your cash flow and your debt service. Now, if you're going to maximize your velocity of money, you're going to refinance and pull out as much of it as you can, which then it hurts your cash flow. It increases your cash on cash return, but your risk is much, much higher when you have a 75% loan to value than if you had a 50% loan to value or even a 0% loan to value.
And so doing it the other way would be growth. Basically, doing a long-term burr would be a in the growth. I gotcha.
Yeah.
I would say potentially. I mean, obviously, I hate speaking in hundred,
Absolutes.
absolutes. Uh, but potentially, I think this risk is, or this is lower risk because I have 2 years of data. I know how this unit or how these units are performing. So when I go to refine refinance out of it versus a true burr where you've never had it rented, you can say, hey, I've been getting this. This is where I'm trending over the last 2 years. Obviously, this will slow down because the renovations are done. But I renovated this unit in the first 2 months. We got it up to the standard. I've gotten rents to here, and we've grown 1 to 2% every year since then. And so you have very good data to show the bank. You can set your loan up that you can break even, you can cash flow, you can lose a little bit, but you can turn that knob a little bit more and have more fidelity into it by doing it that way. Kind
Yeah.
of a tangent, if you will.
And I agree 100%, which is why I think that you can be in the sustainability phase and you can move backwards into, and I say backwards, you can adjust strategy back into the growth phase. And that's where my investment philosophy is at. Now, when interest rates are 2, 3%, I'm saying leverage as much as you can, buy as much as you can, take on all the debt possible, because that's the way that you velocitize the most. But with interest rates going up and cash flow or just being able to cover debt service is more important, I would much rather park all my cash in a money or all my cash in a property. If I was sitting on 500,000, I would just pay off that property in cash. I'd probably get a better deal on it too, which then creates 5, 10% upside off the bat, and then let it run for 6 to 12 to 24 months. So for that exact same reason, is I know how it performs. When interest rates dip, I want to go refinance out of that property. Now that property is on a growth strategy because I'm not looking for it to be paid off and just cash flow. I don't care if it cash flows or not because I just took all that seed capital and redeployed it. And that was one of the first pieces of advice that I got when I started Bigger Pockets. Was I met with a guy that had been doing it for 40 years, one of those gray-haired guys, and he said that the number one goal of growing your investment portfolio is recovering your seed capital. And that's the whole idea behind the burst strategy, is recover your seed capital. And so I think if you were to differentiate between the growth and the sustainability strategy, it's what is your intention behind your seed capital? Am I leaving that money tied up in there to give me that protection so that I know that I'm not going to have to ever be burdened by a mortgage payment? Or am I looking to get it back as soon as possible to send it out and make more money babies?
Yeah, you always want more money, babies.
That's right.
So
Be
yeah,
fruitful and multiply.
yeah. Well, like I said, I had no intention. I just want to kind of go through it. You've mentioned it before. We've never covered it on here. Obviously, there's a million different ways to skin a cat. So everybody's going to be different. Your philosophy is going to be slightly off from mine versus, we had Owen on here before. Owen's philosophy is different. Um, there are so many different, based on how long we've been in the game, how we're making our money, and what our goals are in life, and how many kids you have. There's so many different variables
So
to
many
throw in
different
there.
niches too. I
With
mean, so many different niches. Just, I mean, I think if you went a mile deep in any one strategy in real estate, like you can find endless resources. If you're like, I like mobile home parks, there's 15 different ways to invest in mobile home parks. You could buy the mobile homes themselves. I mean, so I think that that's where the mindset of just become a lifelong learner. And when you start with that and then move in through the phases, it's like then you can focus on those last two, which is what's my strategy for this property? Because there are some properties I look at where I'm like, I just want to park money, get a 15% return on it per year when I sell it. And if it covers expenses for 5 years, then I'm happy.
So, question along that, you mentioned mobile home parks, and it kind of made me think of it. You're an investor, and I want to be a mobile home expert. Do I only look for brokers that are mobile home experts, or do I look for a broker that maybe does a little bit of everything? I know you start off multifamily, kind of went more commercial, but storage is a whole different bear. Mobile home parks is a different bear. Would you do you think it's better to get a broker, a real estate agent, whatever word you want to use, that specializes in that, or does it matter?
I think specialization is key. I mean, you find a generalist, you're going to get generalist advice. But if I was looking for, I knew that I wanted to go buy an industrial property, I would probably go to an industrial specialist, like an industrial broker, where all they do is industrial, because they're going to know things about fire codes and sprinkler systems and the value of 18-foot doors as opposed to 12-foot doors, and the type of trusses and the building materials and all stuff that I've never had to worry about in multifamily, because it's a completely different ball game. So now if someone was, I mean, if they wanted a more generalist approach, then yeah, go to the broker who's dabbled in everything. But I think that going to a specialist is probably your best bet. I would not be the best person to go to for heavy industrial manufacturing, anything like that, because I've never done it. I've never learned there's a lot of hidden things in each industry that people would know. If you went to a retail specialist where all they ever touched was storefronts and all that stuff, they're not gonna know the first thing about what it means to have a an 85% economic occupancy in multifamily. Like just don't translate the same.
Perfect. Well, I think we've beat this to death, and at least gave somebody a good idea of where to start. And they're picking up this podcast in 2026. I think there's a lot of good insight and variables in there. And like I said, there's no one size fits all thing. So use this as a litmus test of what you want to do. Take your what fires you up, and kind of take this and make your game plan for that. So on that, if you don't have anything else, I think we're done for today.
You're done for the year.
I'm done for the year. So it's a wrap for 2025. All other recordings will be in 2026.
Yep.